Hi guys, welcome to this week's Music Tech webinar. We're going to continue with our sampling basics, solely looking at drum machines this week. So last week we looked at sampling as an overview, and I kind of discussed that there was this kind of break-off between drum machines and sampling instruments, and there's a really good reason for that. Basically, in the early days of kind of digital computing, the amount of space that you could store samples on was fairly limited. So what you found happening is people with percussive ideas were able to use drum machines and get these ideas down to really quite a high standard, even though the storage capabilities were quite limited. So it's really important to know there are two break-offs, drum machines and sampling instruments. There's not much difference today, but drum machines still have a massive place, and I'm always using them. Well, I use both completely and utterly. So that's what we're going to look at. If you want to get in touch, please feel free to Twitter at MusicTech101 or visit musictechstudent.co.uk. Always glad to hear from you guys. So what we're going to be covering in this webinar: what are drum machines, a basic history of drum machines, the components, different kinds, and then we're going to do a little demonstration using UltraP, and then just some final thoughts. So firstly, straight from Wikipedia, what is a drum machine? A drum machine is an electronic device able to imitate the sound of a drum kit. Now, a drum machine is so much bigger than that. You can do a lot with a drum machine. You think of it as a trigger for any kind of sound. So in the early days, it was all about the percussive sounds, just purely because of the kind of amount of storage that you could have. Nowadays, though, drum machines are used to trigger lots and lots of things, from loops to instrument tracks, to whole songs, or to sections of songs. And there's a lot of flexibility in a drum machine. So a basic history. 1931, the Rhythmic. I've got a really nice picture of this, and I'll show you that in a second. Moving all the way through to the 1980s, where you had these really nice electronic drum machines made by Roland. The 909 is still a big drum machine today, used by hip hop, used by dance, and the sounds that you can get from these particular instruments have been emulated by pretty much all the DAWs. So that from Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, and Ableton, they've all got emulators for the Roland 909 or the 808. The basic parameters or the components inside of a drum machine kind of consist of three areas. You've got an input section, which is normally represented by either drum pads or a keyboard layout. You've got a sequencer section where you can actually input the parts in time in, say, a 16-note grid. And then finally, you have a manipulation section, which allows you to shape the sound further from envelope shaping, filters, and other modulation parameters like LFOs and other oscillators. So here's the Rhythmic. This is like the very first. This is where it all started from. And you can see that there's a keyboard interface, and then there's some kind of disc thing here with all the samples on, okay? Now the disc is quite interesting because there's like this needle that, as you press one of the musical notes, goes to a specific point on the disc, and then it plays that short sample. Really interesting the way it works. I've included a little demonstration video here just so you can get a better idea. So this is one of my studio's first drum machines, and it's a fantastic one. The Roland 78 is just an amazing piece of kit that you're able just to kind of put down a groove, put down the individual pieces, and then just kind of mix these sounds up. It's fantastic. I don't even know how much you could buy one of these for now. So other ones, the Linn LM1. This was one of the first commercial drum machines. You'll find this on a lot of 80s tracks, dance tracks, disco tracks. It's got some really nice sounds kind of built into it, but it's also possible to program some other sounds as well, and also sequence those. So this is a nice one. Then we got to the Roland ARX, which same three parameters. So you still got the input section, you still got the manipulation section, and you've also got this idea of a sequencer as well. More modern machines include these MPC pads. Now Ableton utilizes MPC pads massively, and they've got some really nice drum pads at the moment, from the Ableton Push to the Launch Pad, where it takes this idea so much further of being able to trigger samples, like drum samples or loops and things like that. Well worth a look at, actually. And then finally, you're looking at your software sampling machine or software drum machines. My ultimate favorite has got to be the Groove Agent 1. I absolutely love it. In terms of simplicity to use and flexibility, you can't beat the interface. It's so clean and it's just instantly intuitive. Whereas the UltraP is massively powerful, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to get to grips with. It does take a little bit of time to kind of understand that. And that's the one we're going to use in this webinar. It's just to kind of demonstrate how this works and get you guys thinking about it a bit more. It won't be a massively in-depth presentation or demonstration, but it will show you kind of how to get your head around it a little bit. So, which brings us on to exploring UltraP. Once again, if you've got any questions, please chuck them my way and I'll try and answer them to the best of my abilities. But here it is. So let's move over to Logic Pro and just see where we're at. So this is UltraP. And I've just opened this up and I've got an initial bank here. If you want to load any kind of samples or any of their presets, just by clicking on this button here and scrolling down, you'll get all your drum kits. And when you click on any of those drum kits, they will load up into these 25 keys. So we said about drum machines have 3 sections. And it's no different here. What you have is this section here. So you have an input section, which is all this area here. You have a manipulation section, which is this area here. And then you have a sequencing section, which is this area here. But in UltraP, if you click on the full view, it brings up a bigger sequencer, okay? So it's really important that you understand that most drum machines are broken up into those 3 areas. So let's just start by looking at the input area. The input area has 25 keys. So if I press my keyboard now on this C, D, E, and then the rest are empty. So I've just got some empty settings there. One thing you need to know is that when you click on one of these keys, each key has its own manipulation area. You have to get your head around this straight away, because you could be thinking, okay, I'm editing the snare, but you've actually got the bass drum selected, okay? So you're messing around with all these manipulation parameters, but you've actually got the bass drum selected, and you're going, oh my God, nothing's changing, but the bass drum's sounding a bit weird now. So it's really important that you click on the parameter that you want to work on. If you don't, you will end up messing something around, and this happens so much both to me and my students, where we're kind of clicking away. It's like, why is this not working? Why is this not working? Oh, I'm on the wrong channel. This is one of the features that makes drum machines so powerful. Unlike sampling instruments, where you have one interface or one manipulation area and it covers the whole of the instrument, this one has 25 different manipulation areas, and if you click through, you'll notice that all of these parameters are changing, okay? And so that's what makes drum machines really, really powerful, and that's why a lot of DJs and a lot of musicians use these as triggers, because it's like having its own door in one interface, really, or in one plugin. Really ridiculously powerful. So each instrument has its own volume section, and if you look up here, you have your master volume for all the instruments. But then you also have, if you slide this blue slider, you have your own channel or your own volume per instrument, okay? So you can manipulate these as much as you want and make them louder or quieter. So if I pull this all the way down, then press my C note, you'll notice not much there. Whereas if I pull it up, hopefully you should hear that. The next thing you have is mute and solo buttons. So if you want to solo this instrument, you press play on the sequencer. Now, rather than hearing these 2 notes as well, all you're hearing is this one. Press stop there. Same with the mute. So if I mute it, you'll hear the other 2 and not that one. Okay. You have your panning dial. So if you only want to hear it coming out the right ear, okay. Or if you only want to hear it coming out the left ear, let me just whiz that over. Okay. Put that back to center. As close as possible. Anyway, there we go. And then you have this section here, your routing section. Now this is really interesting. This is what allows you even more flexibility, because you can route, by clicking on this, you can route any of these channels or any of these individual samples to their own mixing channel. Okay, so as you can see here, this is my bass drum. This is going to main, which is 1 and 2. This is my snare, this is going to 3 and 4, and this is my hi-hat, which is going to 7 and 8. Now, let me just close this for a second and come over to the mixing console. And what you're going to notice is this is my drum machine. Anything in green is my drum machine. Now, I've got these little plus and minus buttons. Sometimes you won't see that. You have to set UltraP up in a certain way. Now, if you set it up as a stereo channel, you won't see that. You won't have that extra bit of flexibility of being able to route each instrument to its own channel. So you have to set it up as a multi-output. And once you do that, you can literally have 25 extra channels and route them all through. And if you look up here, you'll see that this first one is routed to just UltraP, which is my main. So it's going to 1 and 2. So that's my bass drum. This next one is going to 3 and 4. So that's my snare. And this next one is going to 5 and 6, which is my hi-hat. Now, if I solo this and press play, I may have to come into here and just utilize that actually, initialize that. Here we go. Let me just unsolo it. Oh, for some reason that's not routed properly. Oh, it's because it's muted. There we go. Sorry. So now you can hear that's the bass drum, snare, and that's the hi-hat. Okay. Right. So once again, really interesting the way that you can route that, and by routing that basically gives you the ability to add inserts, add more compression, add more effects, and do a lot more stuff outside of UltraP. Let's close that one down. Let's go back to UltraP. So that's the input section. Now the manipulation section is a lot more complex, a lot more going on. So let's just start by just kind of an overview. What you have is 4 oscillators. Oscillator 2 is at the bottom, and it's this kind of maroony area, and you turn the oscillator on or off by using that power button. Oscillator 1 is at the top here. Same again, same maroony area. Anything inside of this maroon area, including this, is part of the first oscillator. Then you have this noise oscillator, which is just there, and then you have this ring modulator. So you have 4 oscillators, okay? Let me turn that one off. Now, how you trigger each of these oscillators, they all work through this kind of oscillator 2. Oscillator 2 is where you load up your sample or you load up your sound. So if I click on this phase oscillator, my bass drum now will be a sine wave of some description. Yeah? Whereas if I click back on sample, it will now be that drum beat again. And then obviously we've got some modeling synthesis as well, which I don't know what that is. I think that's some kind of string, and you can manipulate this to kind of sound differently. Okay, so that's modeling synthesis. Let's go back to my sample. So anything inside of this is my oscillator 1. So anything you kind of do here, you're manipulating. Let's look at pitch. For instance, if I want to bring that pitch down, it's C3 at the moment. Bring that down. Now it'll be a lot lower. Yeah? Let's take that back to C3. What else have you got? Each of the oscillators has its own volume channel, so you can pull the volume up or pull the volume down. Now these green bars and blue bars are quite interesting. This is how the routing works with the modulation sections. You have 2 ways of modulating, via envelopes or via LFOs. Probably a bit more complex than we need to go into today, otherwise we're going to run out of time, but we will come to that. I might do a separate video for that one. Next one, this noise parameter. So we turn that on, we should add a bit of noise to our sound. Can you hear that? Turn that off. Take that back up to C3. For some reason that's not coming through. Okay. What have I got on? Not sure. I've just turned that one off for some reason. So let's go up to this one. Not to worry. Okay, so those are our oscillators. In the middle here, this round wheel is our filter section. In order to route these oscillators into it, you need to turn this button on. So if it looks like a kind of a screw, it's not working, okay? You click on the screw, and now rather than going straight to the output, it now goes through and into the filter. And you've got all the usual suspects for filtering, cutoff and resolution. And you've also got the different filters. So you've got low pass, high pass, band pass, and what's that? Some band reduction filter. The important note here is the noise filter section. This bit here is just for the noise, okay? It has nothing to do with this filter section. Then you have your amplifier section, which basically is the last part of the chain where you can actually set the overall channel, or the overall volumes, the overall modulations, or whatever else. And that's pretty much all I want to say about that. There's some good tutorials out there to do it, and like I say, I'll probably do a couple of my own just to go through each of the individual sounds. So, section 1, the input section. Section 2, manipulation of the actual track. Now, the final section of a drum machine is the sequencer. The sequencer is really interesting. So, if you want to input notes, you can just click and you can input. And that's just doing the hi-hat channel. Now, you'll notice that I'm selecting the hi-hat channel, and down here you have velocity and gating. Now, if I click on this one, you'll notice that it changes. Let me just explain briefly what velocity and gating is. Now, velocity is the individual note volume. So if I do this, let me just solo this bass drum, if it's working. I'm not sure if it's working. Hold on, let me do it on bass. Let me do it on the snare, because I know the snare's working. So here we go, here's the snare, we'll solo it. If I want to bring the volume down, I just bring the volume down here using velocity, much in the same way as you would do in sequencer. Now the gate value is really interesting. If you notice, this one lasts for a lot longer, and it's routed to this note here. So if I click on that and click back, it's routed to this note here, and if I open that up, you'll hear a lot more of the tail. So let me press play again. Yeah, do you hear how much longer that was? Now if I bring that in, the gate value will cut that off a lot quicker. Okay, and that's pretty much how that works. Final thing, if you want to use this on your sequencer, you have to turn the sequencer off. And then you grab your pattern from this button here and you drag it to here. Now, this button is for the sequencer. This is the off button for the sequencer, not the drum unit, okay? So leave the drum unit on, but turn the sequencer off. If you do that, when you click up here, you'll still hear your pattern. Okay? If you left that on, it would double itself. Okay, so you can hear how that works. So hopefully that's a nice little overview of what drum machines are, why you should be using them, and why they are important. Let's go back to the demonstrate. Let's go back to the PowerPoint just to finish up now then. So, final thoughts. Drum machines really take a little bit getting used to. It's like having its own door in one little plugin or one little hardware unit. But there's a lot of value in learning it. There's a lot of things you can do with it, from, you know, all the way up to DJing. Even radio jockeys can use them for just triggering little samples on their shows and things like that. That's pretty much it for me then. So join us on the 11th of May, and we're going to be looking at sampler instruments next time and just how they differ. If you want to get in touch with us in the meantime, you can do that by contact@musictechstudent.co.uk, or you can sign up to our newsletter, mymail.musictechstudent.co.uk, or via Twitter, Facebook, or Google+. Have a good week, guys, and I'll see you on the 11th.